Welcome to our Backyard Brothers podcast. We are talking happy college football today and July 17th. So we still got about a month before the actual college football season kicks off. We're hitting previews pretty early this year, before camps, before preseasons, before those types of things, just because in my experience, at least of writing previews and things like that, if you wait too long, everything changes. And so kind of want to do it at the beginning, and then everything can fall under the umbrella of our preview. So before we get into college football, well, I guess it's still college football. Cody has a memory about for us to talk about. By the way, we're one backyard brother short. Dustin is at a work conference in Chicago this week, so he'll join us next week when we talk about the NFL. So, Cody, take us away.
All right. Well, because we're talking about college football, I was kind of digging through my memory bank of college football games and was able to remember the Clemson and Alabama national championship game from 2017, which is one of the greatest national championship games, probably, period. It was a fantastic game. This is with stars all over the field. Deshaun Watson at quarterback for Clemson. Hunter Renfrow was the receiver. On Alabama side, I believe it was Jalen Hurts, and just, I mean, you could probably go through everyone and see them in the NFL now. And then I remember when I was watching it, I was actually at my aunt's home in Utah, South Jordan, Utah. I was watching it on my phone. And I was a diehard Clemson fan that day. I was sick and tired of anything Alabama, more so than I am now. And it was the first time that I remember Alabama losing the national championship. That I was so into watching, I guess. I'm sure they had lost beforehand that as well. But this is also Clemson's first win since 1981, the national championship. So the first Dabo Swinney win. So anyway, I was just thinking about it. It was an awesome game, fun to watch. I watched it all on my phone in 2017. I remember watching everything up to the last play, and it was just so exciting. One of the best games, period, that I had seen in football. So I want to hear from you guys what you guys thought about the game, if you guys remember what you were doing, etc.
Nancy, do you want to
go? Yeah. So super exciting game. A great pick, Cody. I think there was 2 seconds left whenever Clemson scored the last touchdown pass. And there was a pass interference or something first, right? Before that? Like just before the final play, yeah, I think it was a pass interference. And watching the highlights, and Watson really was kind of the backbone of the team there, other than the Clemson defense. I think offensively, he was just able to really pull that team together in a way that they just refused to lose, and there was enough time on the clock for them to go down and do it, and just beautifully executed. And I remember being impressed that Clemson was able to hold Alabama to, what was it, 28 points or something? It was 28-35, I think it was
31.
31.
35-31.
I think it was a
35. Okay, 35-31. Okay. But still, just an impressive all-around performance by Clemson to be able to beat what was at the time considered to be a superior Alabama team. I'm sure Clemson was kind of looked at as the underdog going into that. And I love to see the underdog get the win in any kind of big game situation there.
Yeah, a couple of things, and you both know me. I like to bring in context and history and things like that. And so, what a lot of people may not remember is this was a rematch from the previous year. The national championship game of 2016 was the same two teams, and Alabama won that one in a very high-scoring game that honestly could have been considered one of the better games too. And I think it was 45-40. Alabama won the year before, so it was also a really good game, also really high scoring, and so. When 2017 game happened, a national championship, and you have the same two teams, everyone's like, why do we even want to watch this game? We have the same two teams playing from the previous year. Like, this sucks. I was one of those guys, by the way. I was like, expand the playoffs so we don't get the same teams every single year. We'll talk about that today. Anyway, beyond that, Cody, you mentioned all of the stars on both teams. Let me tell you, I went through and I looked at all the starters from both of these teams, how many went to the NFL. Clemson, of their 22 starters, half of them went to the NFL, 11 of the 22. Alabama, 19 of their 22 starters ended up in the NFL. 19 of 22. That's insane, and some of them are some of the best players. Calvin Ridley was on that Alabama team. You talked about Jalen Hurts; he was the quarterback. The two really good defensive tackles for the Commanders now: Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne. Defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson, Marlon Humphrey, Minka Fitzpatrick. They were all on Alabama at that time. Clemson had some good players too. Mike Williams was the great receiver now for the Jets. Was for the Chargers. Deshaun Watson was their quarterback. Christian Wilkins, the defensive tackle. Dexter Lawrence, their other defensive tackle. So both teams had really good players. And also what happened in that game, it looked like it was going to go Alabama's way. Alabama was up by 2 scores in the fourth quarter. They were up 10. In the fourth quarter, and Clemson came back, took the lead by 4. Alabama then takes the lead back, and then Clemson goes down. I think they had 4 minutes on that last drive to go down the field. And Yancey, you called out the pass interference called on Mike Williams in the end zone with like 6 seconds left that put the ball at the 1-yard line. And then the last play of the game was a rub route, which honestly, it was offensive pass interference, but no one wants to say that. But it was clear offensive pass interference on Clemson that was not called. But I mean, good for Clemson, good for those of us that didn't want to see Alabama win again. But if you want to be a technical person about it, that was offensive pass interference against Clemson, but wasn't called. Clemson won the game with 1 second left, I think it was. And then they actually kicked an onside kick to not let Alabama get the ball. And Clemson recovered their own onside kick, took a knee, and got out of there. And so it was a great game. It was fun to watch. I was also hoping for a Clemson win just because it was the lesser of two evils, in my opinion. But but it was a great football game. No one can doubt that. Even those people that didn't want to see these two teams play, you still want to see a good football game, and it was a great football game between two really good teams, essentially NFL junior varsity teams. So,
and I think it was. I was watching the highlights today. I think they had 2 minutes on the clock. Clemson at the last drive. Okay. I think it was like 2 or 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
I think
when they started, yeah.
Yeah, when they started, and then they went down the field. Yeah.
Yeah. Great memory. Cody, do you have anything else to close it out?
Not really. I mean, that's why we love football so much. It keeps us coming back, is these types of games. All the Georgia versus TCU games, suck. I mean, if you're a Georgia fan, great, but you're not going to want to watch that either. These are the kind of games that everyone wants to see, even if it's the two powerhouses everyone sees every year. It kind of sucks in a way, but seeing it come down to literally the final second is what makes it exciting, even if it is Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, so that's it.
Yeah. Awesome. Before we jump to college football, just a brief minute of news here. We all know about Kobe Bryant, that he passed away. What is it now? 4 years? 5 years?
I think it was
4 or 5 years?
6 years. 2019.
It was 2020, I thought, right at the height of COVID, right when COVID started, I thought. So, Kobe died in that tragic helicopter crash in LA. Anyway, Kobe's dad died. Was he today or was he yesterday? Maybe
Uh,
a couple days ago, even. But this
yeah, I
week,
think it was yesterday, but I'm not 100% sure.
yeah. He was a professional basketball player as well. If for those of you who don't know, he played overseas in Italy. In fact, I think Kobe was born in Italy while his dad was playing overseas. Um, and so a coach, a father for him, his father obviously a coach for him, and a mentor that helped him on his way. And he just passed away. I didn't look how old he was, but I think it was fairly natural causes. But I didn't look that far into it either. Anyone have anything else to say about that? Jelly Bean Bryant. I can't remember his first name right now off the bat either, but I'll look that up in a second.
I don't have anything to add, just for respect, even because I don't know how much. So
Yeah, just
Joe.
condolences, and just wanted to add that to the news.
Yeah, Joe Jelly Bean Bryant. He was 69 from a stroke. It looked like. So okay. All right, jumping back into college football. I was telling Yancey and Cody just before we jumped on. Last year's college football preview was pretty relaxed. We said we just kind of looked at each other and we said, what about these teams that played last year, and what about these teams in this conference? And then we called out a couple of the teams like that. This year, I wanted to be a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more deliberate, in depth about this preview, mainly because it's quite a bit more of an exciting year now that the playoff has moved from 4 teams to 12 teams. And we'll talk about the playoff in a little bit as well, but the format essentially it until the Pac-12 completely blew up, it was going to be the champion from each of those 5 divisions that would get an automatic bid, and then the 7 highest seeded teams after them that would go to the playoff. Now that it's the Pac-2, they don't get that anymore. The winner of the Pac-2 does not get to go. So it's now the winner of the 4 major conferences and the highest seeded champion of a group of 5 team. And so a group of 5 conference champion, whichever is the highest seeded champion, gets that automatic bid, which is great. That we make sure that a group of 5 team gets in there no matter what. And then the 7 highest seeded teams after that. So we're going to talk about the conferences. We're going to start. I was telling these guys, I have no idea how long this is going to take. I don't know if we'll get through all 134 teams today. We could go quickly, but we're going to start with the ACC and work our way down through the 4 major conferences first. So with that in mind, let me share my screen. Do you see this ACC screen?
I do.
Yep.
Okay. So before I get to the individual teams, there's changes with every major division this year. The ACC added 3 teams. They were at 14 last year. They added 3. From the Pac-12, they added California, and they added, where am I going here? Stanford. Cal and Stanford. And they also added SMU from the American Conference. So it's obviously no longer regionally based. When you got a team from Boston and a team from Berkeley, California, you don't exactly have a region-based thing going on anymore. So with that in mind, let's start alphabetically. Also, all divisions except one has completely done away with divisions. It's all one conference. There's no more divisions. And so that means that you don't have the winner of one division playing the winner of the other for the championship. You now have the 2 best teams playing no matter what. So that's the case everywhere here. Boston College, I have here where they ranked in the country in points. And they have points allowed, yards allowed, and then passing yards and rushing yards. They were not good at anything really, other than maybe rushing yards last year. 7-6. They did win a bowl game. They beat SMU, who coincidentally enough is now in their division, in their same conference this year. So just a couple of things. I've put the losses mainly are the players from the teams that went to the NFL draft. Just to mention that, and the head coach, if applicable. The head coach is gone. He joined the Green Bay Packers this year. He is their defensive coordinator now. So Boston College has a new coach. You may know him. Bill O'Brien, the former head coach of the Houston Texans, is now the head coach of Boston College. And I've mentioned quarterback is mentioned in every one of the teams since it's the most important position. And then two important pieces, whether it's defense or offense, that you may see in the NFL draft next year, for example. And then their schedule is over here. This is the format that all teams are going to be set up in. If there's a particular one that's important, I'm going to call it out. But you just see the schedule over there. And rather than stop and talk about every team, what do you guys think about just going through the whole conference and then talking about it afterward? Or do you want to stop and talk about every team?
I think we should just fly through it and pick out our standouts. Like each person kind of go through who they think will have the most success in that conference or something like that, unless you guys disagree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, if there's something that's giant about a certain team, we should stop and talk about it right then and there. But other than that, I agree.
So I'm going to breeze through this. You guys have the freedom to stop me and talk about something. Otherwise, I'm just going to breeze through the conference. So next is Cal. They went 6-7 last year, lost a bowl game to Texas Tech. Also not very good on any category in particular last year. They lost one player to the NFL draft. One player to call out, though, is Jaden Ott right here, the running back for Cal. He is a fantastic player. As someone, Cody, who was in the Pac-12 with him, he's a scary guy. I think he actually led the country in rushing yards last year. And instead of going to the NFL draft, he decided to return to Cal for one more year. So he is an important player to watch. He's going to be an NFL pick next year, most likely, at running back.
Quick point out, Fernando Mendoza looks like he made his own name up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Justin Wilcox in his 8th year over there. Clemson. They went 9-4. That's obviously a step back from where they usually are supposed to be. They did win the Gator Bowl against Kentucky. They were good on offense. They actually forced the most turnovers of any team in college football last year. They forced 28 turnovers. That's in 13 games. So that's more than 2 per game that they forced. Really, really good on defense. Lost a lot of players to the NFL. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 draft picks went to the NFL last year. Cade Klubnik was supposed to be a Heisman Trophy candidate heading into last year. That didn't pan out. So they're not so sure about him anymore. But Peter Woods and Barrett Carter will both be probably 1st or 2nd round picks next year on the defensive line. Dabo Swinney in his 16th season, he's won 2 national championships, one of the best college coaches out there. Moving on to Duke. They had a really great season as well, went 8-5, won the Birmingham Bowl. Pretty good on defense, 16th out of 33 teams on points allowed. They had a very good defense. 3 draft picks, and their head coach became the head coach of Texas A&M. So they have a new regime change. It's Manny Diaz, who has been the head coach of Miami from 2019 to 2021. I can't remember where he was last year. Penn State, I think, defensive coordinator. Malik Murphy, their quarterback, is a transfer from Texas, coming in to join them. Again, this was a good team last year, but a big head coaching change to see what happens there. Florida State, a lot of things we can talk about here. They were the team that went undefeated in the regular season and were left out of the 4-team playoff and didn't show up, obviously, for the Orange Bowl and got destroyed by Georgia. But this was a great team that obviously would have been in a 12-team playoff if that existed last year. But look how many players went to the NFL. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 draft picks went to the NFL last year. Mike Norvell in his 5th season there. They also have a new quarterback because their quarterback ended up with the New York Jets. DJ, someone has to help me out with his last name, but
Ulongi. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I had it before, but Uangalele. That's it. Uangalele.
Wow.
That sounds about right. I would have butchered it worse. Good job, Cody.
Because it's in his culture, the G's make an NG sound, so Uangalele.
Okay. DJ was the quarterback for Oregon State last year. I think he was quarterback somewhere else previously too. So I think this is his 3rd stop in college football. Patrick Payton and Shaheem Brown probably will both be 1st-round picks next year in the NFL draft. This is a really good team, even though they're losing 10 players to the NFL draft. They pretty much just retool. So, Georgia Tech. This was a team that had languished for many, many years in like 3, 4, 5-win seasons. Last year they won 6 and then also won the bowl game. So they're back where they're supposed to be. They didn't lose anyone to the draft, but a couple of graduation. A lot of players returned back. Haynes King is the quarterback, head coach Brent Key. So a lot of players returning to this team that went 7-6 last year. A lot of continuity going on. Louisville, 10-4 last year. They played in the ACC championship game against Florida State, lost it, and then lost the Holiday Bowl to USC. Louisville lost 4 players to the draft. Head coach Jeff Brom took a team that was, I think, 4-8 before he got there and immediately turned them around, won 10 games his first season. He's also a former quarterback for Louisville. And so he understands that team, that culture. Tyler Show is a transfer. I can't remember. I think it's Texas Tech that he's transferring from. But yeah. Let's see. Miami went 7-6 last year. Lost the bowl game to Rutgers. Lost 4 players to the NFL draft. Head coach Mario Cristobal in his 3rd season. He probably is on the hot seat considering where he's playing at and that he has a losing record for Miami. He was the head coach at Oregon before deciding to go back home to Miami, but he hasn't had the success that he hoped to have. Francisco Mauigoa is a 1st-round pick next year at linebacker. He's probably the best linebacker in this conference.
So I was going to say just a thing. I'm not sure if you're about to talk about it, but Cam Ward was exceptional at Washington State. Really deadly legs and arm, and so he might really help out Miami. He was going to be going to the draft at first, but he decided to come back. So that's exciting to watch him.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't going to call that out, so I'm glad you did. So, okay, North Carolina, 8-5 last year. Finished 14th in passing yards in the country, almost 300 passing yards per game, mainly because of this guy, Drake May, who is the 3rd overall pick to the Patriots, along with 2 other guys. Max Johnson is a transfer. Maybe I should have put where they transferred from because I don't remember now, but I think it was A&M, something like that. Mac Brown is in his 16th total season. He's split between 2 tenures. He was the Carolina coach before becoming coach at Texas and then becoming an analyst and now returning back to North Carolina. So Omarion Hampton, also a really good running back at UNC. NC State, 9-4 last year, lost the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I don't know why they call these. It's a horrible name. I'm sorry. I love Pop-Tarts, but that's a bad name for a bowl. So NC State gets Grayson McCall, transfer from Coastal Carolina. He was also considering going to the NFL draft and then decided to play for a big conference team rather than Coastal Carolina, see if he can increase his draft stock for next year. Peyton Wilson, who left in the 3rd round, was the nation's best linebacker last year. He won the Bednarik Award. So they're losing a really good linebacker. Pittsburgh, 3-9. Here we're getting into a bad team here. Pitt used to be, they were traditionally getting into the ACC championship game for several years, and last year was not one of those years. Pat Narduzzi in his 10th season, they're chalking that up to just a bad year, but he can't do that again if he wants to keep a job. But They lost 3 draft players, but I think Nate Yarnell and Rodney Hammond and Donovan McMillan are all returning players. If you think that's continuity, that's great. If you also think why keep players that went 3-9, they can go one way or the other. So SMU, one of the second new team to this conference. They were really good last year in the American Conference. Let's make sure that that's known. They went 11-3, lost to Boston College in the bowl game. They were 8th in points in the country, almost 40 points per game as a team. So you can think that they might be able to compete with the ACC, but this is playing really good teams week in and week out, really. Preston Stone returns to the team. They get Elijah Roberts, transfer from Miami, a defensive end. But again, they're not just playing American teams anymore. You got Florida State in here. You've got Duke and Boston College and Virginia and BYU and TCU. So winning 11 games this year may not be quite as easy for SMU. So.
And sorry, just one quick thing. SMU joined the conference at a the agreement where they won't get any payout for 7 years. So they were pretty desperate. They were just to say we're part of a power conference.
But 7 years?
7 years was at least what I remember the talk being. So they're going to have their boosters and alumni basically paying their institution for the next 7 years. That's it. I don't understand it, but that's what I read.
That seems unsustainable.
It does. I don't understand that. Maybe we need to go back and look at that and fact check that because it's so ridiculous. But I remember reading that at one point and hearing it on a podcast, and they were just kind of like, "Please just take us."
It seems like the only way that's worth it is if they win the conference and get an automatic bid to the playoff. That's the only way that's worth it. So
yeah, and then I know Cal and Stanford took. I think they're doing like 30% or 35 or 40% payout. So
yeah, I think that one's correct. And here's Stanford, by the way. They went 3-9 in the Pac-12. So now you're getting. You can debate which conference was stronger. Last year, probably Pac-12 was stronger than the ACC, but so they may have it a little bit easier schedule, but they still got Clemson and Notre Dame both on the road. So kind of a tough schedule there. Elijah Brown is he's not a transfer, but he's a true freshman coming in to start at quarterback over there. But I think he was one of the highest recruits in the whole country at quarterback and chose Stanford over other teams. And so what do you know? Their one draft pick was a kicker. So went to the Rams. So but I don't know how to say his name. Elik Ayomanor, something like that, is a really good receiver. He's a big guy. I think he's 6'3", 6'4", can fight for balls near the end zone if Elijah Brown can get him the ball. So Syracuse went 6-7 in the ACC last year. Nothing really good to point out in their standings. Also didn't lose anyone except their head coach, finally fired, I think, after 8 years at Syracuse. He had done really good for a few years with Syracuse, getting them into the top contention of the ACC. But he's fired, and in comes Fran Brown, who was a defensive backs coach for Georgia last year, to try to take over. But the big addition is this guy right here, Kyle McCord, who was the Ohio State quarterback last year. Started at quarterback for Ohio State. Instead of going to the draft, I think he took his 5th-year senior season to take it over at Syracuse.
Which I think was probably the right decision. He wasn't really a star, you would say, on Ohio State. So
Virginia, 3-9 last year as well. And you see, when you get numbers starting into the hundreds, you know you're not very good. So almost 34 points per game allowed, 119th in the country. Not a good defense. Tony Elliott is their head coach in his 3rd season. He came over from Clemson, and he has a 6-16 total record so far. He took over for Bronco Mendenhall and has really struggled because Bronco had them playing in the ACC championship game several years. And so, something's going wrong there. But Anthony Colandrea, quarterback, I don't know what they can do to get that team back. And
where did Mendenhall go?
Mendenhall, he didn't retire at first. He said he was stepping away from the game. I think he was out for 3 years. He was just hired this year as New Mexico's head coach. So, University of New Mexico. Virginia Tech went 7-6 last year. Won the Military Bowl. No losses at all. I couldn't find a single loss. I think they returned most of their players from last year. The quarterback Kyron Drones, defensive players, head coach Brent Pry has them going in the right direction. This is a team, I think, a dark horse to watch out for, Virginia Tech this year. We'll get to talking about that in a second. Wake Forest, 4-8 last year, 115th in points per game, 100th in passing yards, 104th in yards per game. Nothing good to really point out here. They do get Hank Bachmeier, quarterback transfer. I can't remember where he played last year, but he was the Boise State quarterback a couple of years ago. But he played somewhere else last year. I can't remember where. Dave Clawson now in his 11th season. They had 3 draft picks, 2 on defense, 1 on the offensive line. And that is the ACC. So,
did we do North Carolina? I don't remember them being in there.
We did.
We did. Okay, I missed. All right.
So what I have here is we're each going to pick which teams we think are going to be playing for the ACC championship, who's going to win, who is an automatic playoff qualifier, and any other teams you think might qualify for the playoffs. So that's what we'll do when we fill this out. But before we get there, what do you guys have to say about any of these teams in the ACC or the ACC as a whole? And I can go back here and you might be able to see them all at once. So,
I mean, I think the first thought I have is, looking through the conference, as a conference itself, it's not a strong conference. I mean, the majority of those teams were in the hundreds in rankings. The majority of those teams were 6-5, 4-win teams, to be honest. And so it's kind of interesting, especially with teams like Pitt, who's typically really good. They just had a really, really, really bad year last year. And so I think really the main contenders of this conference are almost routinely Florida State, Clemson, NC State, and then maybe Virginia every now and then, but I don't know. So.
Yeah, I agree with Cody on most of that. I think this year Virginia Tech will be sneaky good, like Scott was saying. And I think that pretty much Florida State is going to be dominant in this conference for the next couple of years. Florida State, Clemson, and Virginia Tech are kind of my top 3 and looking at the numbers here.
Yeah, like you guys, a lot of conferences you're going to say, wow, there are 10 teams in here that could win this conference. In the ACC, it pretty much comes down to Florida State, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and maybe Louisville. Those are kind of the 4 that I would throw in there as teams that could compete. But
the last thing I would say is I actually expect there to be a drop-off with Florida State, just because of how many people went to the draft. There's a lot of people and a lot of who they were. The reasons they were so good went to the draft or graduated and left. And so they were a very experienced team last year. And now they're trying to replace, I think, over half of their starters at this point. And so I don't expect a 5-win season or anything. I think it'll be 9 wins probably, but I think that's a drop off for sure for them.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you there.
Okay. Well, let's start with you, Cody. And who's playing for the ACC championship out of these 2 teams? Out of these 17 teams, which 2 are the 2 best?
I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say Clemson. Clemson's gonna be in it. The other one, let's go Louisville. Let's go Clemson and Louisville.
See how this shows up. Okay, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of design. Okay. And Cody, who's winning that game?
I think Clemson's winning that.
Okay, so I'm going to put Clemson both here. Oh, they don't have to go there. Okay, so this is an automatic qualifier for the playoffs. Is Louisville one of the top 12 teams that also gets in?
I don't think so.
Okay, so is any other team from this conference getting into the playoff?
I don't think so.
Yancey, who are your, actually, it's alphabetically, it's going to be me. And so, but I'm kind of with you, Yancey. It's Florida State's going to dominate this conference, in my opinion. And I'm going to pick Virginia Tech, that they're going to play in that championship game. So
You beat me to it.
did I? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to pick the exact same thing.
Okay. Well, that makes it easy on me.
I got Tech winning though, so we'll see if that's different.
I don't have them winning, so yeah.
All right.
So this makes it easy to do like this. So, but I have Florida State, and you have Virginia Tech. I do have Virginia Tech going to the playoff, though. Do you have Florida State in the playoff too? Still, even though they lose this game?
I think I would put Tech in Florida, and they only get one, right?
Well, they only get one automatic qualifier, but the seven highest seeds that are remaining after the automatic qualifiers all get in the playoff. And
yeah, so I see.
If Florida State's one of those.
Yeah, I see them having a good enough record to get them up there.
Yeah. Any other team for you or me that also makes? I would say Clemson has a shot, but I'm not going to put them in there. So.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That I don't have anybody in there that really stands out other than the two teams that I put in the championship.
Yeah, and we'll get Dustin's picks later, but okay. So let's move to the Big 12. You can see the teams here. A lot of movement in the Big 12 this year. You had two teams leave the Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma both went to the SEC. And then 2 years ago, you had four teams come into the Big 12. You had Central Florida, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU all joined the Big 12 last offseason. And then Oklahoma and Texas left it this year. And then you had Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah all join it from the Pac-12. And so a lot of big movement. They lose two, they gain four. And so ultimately they gained two from last year. They're a 16-team conference this year. So, and we'll go through these teams here. Arizona, 10-3 last year, won the Alamo Bowl against Oklahoma. So against the team that was leaving the conference. And so Arizona, excellent season, 18th in points, 20th in yards, 8th in passing yards. This guy returns, Noah Fafita, quarterback. He took over game 3, game 4, game 2, something like that. He didn't start the season, but he.
Yeah, it was pretty early on. I don't remember exactly what it was.
But yeah, he took over at some point in that season, and then Arizona was amazing the rest of the time that he was there. They do lose 3 draft picks, and their head coach left to become the head coach of Washington. And so they bring over Brent Brennan, who was the head coach at San Jose State last year, and the last few years. And so kind of maybe a drop off in coaching talent, but other than that, this Fafita, Tyrone McMillan, and a couple other receivers, this is a really good offense that's going to give some teams struggles. Arizona State, another team, not as good as their in-state counterpart. They went 3-9 last year, 124th in points. That's almost at the very bottom. They're not even averaging 20 points a game last year. It was rough. They don't lose anyone to the NFL. They do lose a wide receiver who graduated. Same quarterback comes back, Trenton Bourget, I don't know his name. And head coach Kenny Dillingham in his second season didn't go the way he wanted in his first year. Not sure it's going to change going into the Big 12. So Baylor also went 3-9. This was a team that was in the playoff conversation not long ago, but they went 3-9 last year. Sawyer Robertson returns at quarterback. Dave Aranda had this team a few years ago on the brink of the playoffs, but this team has fallen off completely. And their quarterback, Blake Shapen, left to become the quarterback at Mississippi State. And so Sawyer Robertson was a freshman last year. He's a sophomore this year, trying to take the reins.
And I think it was a colossal mistake, in my opinion, that Baylor did not fire Dave Aranda at the end of last year. And so I'm not sure what they're going to be. I'm not sure what they're expecting this year.
Fair point. Whoops. BYU. For the first time in, I think, 8 consecutive seasons, they missed a bowl game last year. Went 5-7. They in the hundreds just about everywhere. Just not good in anything. 23 points per game, allowed almost 30 points per game. That's not sustainable when you lose every game by 7 points on average. So went 5-7. They lost one draft pick, a high draft pick of offensive tackle to the Chiefs. They do bring in a transfer quarterback because their quarterback ended up in the NFL, not as a draft pick. I think he's a undrafted rookie. I can't remember where he ended up. But anyway, Jerry Bohannon comes over from South Florida. He's a transfer from USF. He brings a run element to this team that they haven't had since Taysom Hill was the quarterback over there. And so bringing a guy that can really run around. They love their big receivers. If you've seen BYU play, they have tall, big receivers. Chase Roberts is no different. He's 6'6" as a receiver. So Kalani Sitake is in his 9th season. He's done really well, but last year obviously was a drop-off, and seeing if they can get them back. I'm not sure that BYU is going to tolerate another losing season with him.
I think that, I mean, it's not surprising. It was our first year in the Big 12, right? I think, yeah, it was our first year in the Big 12. And so going from independent, where a majority of their games were typically, they had, well, maybe half their games were group of 5, and then half was Power 5. Going to now where it was 3/4 at least was Power 5 opponents. It's not really surprising. And I think Kalani can fix that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Central Florida. They went 6-7. They were the lone team that entered the Big 12 that went to a bowl game in their first year in the Big 12. So that's something to talk about. 8th in yards per game. They moved the ball really well on offense. KJ Jefferson was the Arkansas quarterback last year, and now he joins the UCF as a transfer. Gus Malzahn, you may remember him. He coached in the national championship game for Auburn back maybe 10 years ago. Probably more than that now, 12 years ago. Anyway, he's the head coach of UCF. They lost 2 draft picks, but this is a good team. Again, the only of those 4 that joined the conference that went to a bowl game in their first year. Cincinnati, their first year in the Big 12, much worse than even BYU was, 3-9. I can't remember where he transferred from, Brendan Sorsby. A lot of transfers at quarterback, by the way. 1 draft pick, Scott Satterfield at head coach. So Colorado, a new team from the Pac-12, joining along with Arizona and Arizona State. They went 4-8 in the Pac-12. If you remember, first game of the season for Colorado, they beat TCU in TCU. TCU was the defending, not the defending champion, but the team that went to the national championship the year before. Colorado beats them at TCU, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, Deion Sanders is going to take this team to the national championship game. They proceed to win 3 more games the rest of the year, and figures out that TCU didn't make a bowl game either. So TCU was a bad team too. Anyway, we'll talk about TCU in a second. Shedeur Sanders, though, returns, Deion's son. Guess who Shiloh Sanders is? So Deion has his 2 sons playing on this team. Travis Hunter is someone to watch, though. Cody, if you were watching any Colorado games last year, you know what I'm about to say. Travis Hunter is not just a cornerback. He's also a wide receiver. He's one of the only guys that plays both sides of the ball in college football. He is an all-conference receiver and an all-conference cornerback and an all-conference returner. He's a draft pick pretty soon in what he can do.
Yeah, I 100% back that up. I watched him as often as I could, and I have not seen better instincts. Honestly, even in the NFL, to be honest, I mean he was breaking on the ball so fast as a corner, I could not believe it. He is phenomenal.
Houston went 4-8 last year. They fired their head coach Dana Holgerson after the season, bring in Willie Fritz, who was the Tulane head coach the last few years, trying to generate more offense with that team. All the same main players you can say here, trying to get that team back up to where they've been previously. Iowa State, we're getting back to the meat of what we know as the Big 12 because, a lot of these influx of teams, but Iowa State went to a bowl game last year, went 7-6. Rocco Becht, their quarterback. I think he was their main quarterback last year too. Matt Campbell has done a really great job. For previous to him, Iowa State was horrible at football. I think they had won 2-3 games on average for the previous 20 years in a row. Matt Campbell gets there, immediately changes his culture. He's been great for this football team. Kansas, speaking about good teams that have not been good for a long time, Kansas went 9-4 last year, 9th in the country in rushing yards per game. They were a really, really good team. Lost 2 draft picks, but returned all of their players, their main players here. Jalen Daniels is a really good quarterback, both running and passing the ball. He's mainly a running threat, in my opinion, but he's a really good rushing quarterback. Devin Neal helps out as well. Lance Leopold has got that team playing really well. After 2 really bad seasons, he's had 2 pretty good seasons now and got that team moving in the right direction. I don't think Kansas has been good since 2007. So you got him back after 17 years. Kansas State went 9-4 last year. They won the Pop-Tarts Bowl against NC State. They were 10th in the country in points per game. Not bad in points allowed either, under 30th. So good K-State team. Lost 3 draft picks. Avery Johnson, their quarterback. Head coach Chris Kleeman. Moving on to Oklahoma State. They went 10-4. Really good team last year that their numbers don't show it very much, but they have a really good running back as well in Ollie Gordon. I was surprised he didn't go to the NFL draft, actually, but he stayed at OK State for his senior season. If I said previously that the Cal guy, Jaden Knott, led the country in rushing, it was either him or Ollie Gordon. I can't remember who actually won that rushing title, but Ollie Gordon's good too. So.
One thing for sure is that Ollie Gordon, I think, is going to be the first running back off the board in the draft.
He's great, and I think Oklahoma State is licking their chops now that Texas and Oklahoma are gone. That maybe Oklahoma State can take up that mantle. But Mike Gundy now in his 20th year at OK State, 12-6 in bowl games, so he does pretty well in the postseason too. TCU, remember this team went to the national championship the year before, finished 5-7, and didn't make a bowl game at all. They did get 11th in the country in yards per game, though. They didn't move the ball quite well. They just didn't score once they moved it. Josh Hoover, Savion Williams, Nnamdi Obiazor, head coach Sonny Dykes, lost 3 draft picks last year. Texas Tech went 7-6, won the Independence Bowl. Lost 2 draft picks. They're returning all of their key players that I'm mentioning here, along with head coach Joey McGuire. Utah, they're the 4th Pac-12 team to come over to join the Big 12. They went 8-5 last year. Obviously not up to Utah standards, but they had a lot of injuries that they dealt with last year. They lost the boring bowl to Northwestern, 14-7. Finished 100th in points per game, 120th in passing yards, 94th in yards. Just not good offensively. Defensively was a different story. They've always been good defensively under Kyle Whittingham. 18th in points allowed, 13th in yards allowed, 4th in rushing yards allowed. Excellent defensive team. They lost 5 draft picks to the NFL. Cole Bishop, Jonah Ellis, pretty much and Sione Vaki actually played safety for Utah in addition to running back. He was one of those guys that played both sides of the ball. He's listed as a running back now in Detroit, so probably on offense more than defense. But I'll speak for you, Cody, that you're really excited to see these two guys back because both Cam Rising and Brant, I don't know how to say his last name, but Brant Keithy were both injured for all or almost all of last year. And so these two guys are both really good. Brant Keithy is probably a day 2 pick at the tight end, if not day 1 pick next year. Cam Rising, his future is uncertain. We don't know yet if he's kind of an NFL caliber quarterback or not. But Kyle Whittingham, in his 21st season at Utah, there's been talk about his imminent retirement, whether it's after this season or in a couple of years. We don't know yet. But 21 years, heck of a coach, and probably has that team better than 8-5 this year. So. West Virginia, last team in the Big 12, went 9-4 last year, 4th in rushing yards per game. A great rushing team. Neil Brown in his 6th season, they lost 1 draft pick. So let me back up all the way, give you seizures here, but all the way to this one. What do you got to say about these teams in the Big 12?
I think I'm not sure if sneaky good is even a good explanation. They might just be great, but Arizona is a team to really be watching out for. I think that they're dangerous, and I think this is one of the conferences that there are probably 8 teams in this conference that could win. So that's exciting. There's a lot of parity. The conference, rather than, like the ACC where there's like maybe 3 or 4. So that's something that's just super exciting. And I think there's a lot of good teams, a lot of good players that's going to make some good football games.
I really only see a couple of standouts. I think it's kind of a stink fest in this conference, to be honest with you. Arizona should dominate, with Kansas and OSU not far behind. That's the only true competition I see here, unless Utah puts it together. But they didn't really have it together last year. That could be the injuries. TCU is usually good, but I think that's in a downward spiral as opposed to climbing up. So I'm interested to hear, Scott, if you disagree with that, but I don't see a ton of competition here. I see Arizona being good and the rest competing to get 6 wins.
I guess I'm kind of between you two, because Cody, I don't see 8 teams. But I see 4 that could really compete for a championship. And as returning Big 12 members here, you got to be annoyed that Arizona and Utah are probably the 2 best teams in this conference. And so the 2 newcomers coming in are the 2 best teams in this conference, with Oklahoma State being a caveat, saying that team, Oklahoma State, could challenge to retain their Big 12 status. Kansas State is the other one that I see. Those 4 being the top 4 teams, and Kansas as a dark horse candidate as well. So 4 and a gentleman's 5th, if I could say it that way, as 5 teams that could possibly compete to get a playoff spot, to get to the championship game. We're going to do a rotation here over to me first, which means I have to go back up here. Like I said, I have 3 teams here: Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma State, and I have to pick 2 of them to go to the championship game, and that's a tough one. I'm going to say Oklahoma State is one of them that gets there. I'm going to pick Utah, and Oklahoma State in that championship game. I'm over here. Read names. My name is the one that starts with an S. You can just stay there. And sorry, Cody, but I'm taking the OSU to win that game. And let's see, but I'm going to keep Utah in the playoff, actually, though, probably as a 12th seed, but I'm going to pick them to get there, and I'm going to take Arizona as well in the playoff. So even though they don't make the championship game, I'm keeping them as a top 12 team.
So you have 3 Big 12 teams going to the.
I have 3 Big 12 teams in the playoff. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, but over to Yancey. What's your championship game?
I got Arizona, Kansas. With an Arizona win.
Oops. Here.
And Arizona in the playoffs also.
Yeah, they get an automatic bid.
Okay, then
any other team from Big 12.
I don't think anybody else really gets it for me.
Okay. Cody?
I'm going to say it's going to be Kansas State and Utah in the championship.
Okay. Who wins that game?
Whether it's biased or not, Utah's winning that game.
Okay. Anyone else getting into the playoff?
I think Oklahoma State gets in as well. But that's it. So just Utah and Oklahoma State.
Yeah. All right. What do you guys think? Do we have time for one more conference?
What's real time?
We got about 15 minutes. So.
I don't think we'd make it through I think that would put us like 30 minutes over, like just based on the amount of time it's taken us to do each one. What do you guys think? Like, because we got through 2 conferences in an hour.
I mean, SEC has 16 teams, I think, and
the Big Ten has 18.
So. Right, and Big Ten has 18. That's what I was going to say. So, I
that's
don't
the team conference that would be up.
Maybe
save
it.
We're not getting through 18 teams within 25 or 30 minutes.
I hear that. Okay, so let's just stay on this this slide and see if we can talk about anything else. So, we can go back and add other teams if needed, but there are 7 teams that will be coming out of any of these other conferences that won't win a championship, or that didn't win a championship, that are just at-large bids, and that's why I'm taking 3 or 2 of those 7 out of the Big 12. I probably have. I may have to revisit that and take off Arizona because Big Ten and SEC will take up a majority of those teams. So I may have to revisit that. So.
College Football 25 is incredible. Buy it, play it. It's fun.
I can't wait. I have to, obviously, once I move, then I'll be looking probably on just like Facebook Marketplace to get a new, an Xbox S.
I'll put up a stream of a game for you. You check it out.
Yeah, looking forward to that too. I have to put it in the budget probably for August.
So. It's dope. It's not Madden. They did a good job.
I've always enjoyed college football more than Madden, to be honest. So I'm just stoked to have it back.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and then I got to play even like a day before I was expecting to get to play. I felt like a child, bro.
Nice. Let's see. We have 15-ish minutes to talk about anything else. Do either of you have some topics that we want to discuss? We could also end early, but
Let's see here. Let me check.
Let's see. Yancey, you weren't here last week. We talked about we showed your Randy Johnson clip at the beginning of the podcast and had our lulls about that. And
Yeah, I thought that was funny, and I think Bob is his name, right? I've never met or spoke to him, but I thought it was really funny how he had those the Randy Johnson moments, and how he's like, "That's not even the top one." Like I thought that was really cool, and I could see the kind of respect that he has for baseball, and that was a cool moment of watching the podcast that I got to see that.
Yeah. Yep. And so we'll be covering baseball more as it gets into September and October, probably. It gets closer to the playoffs and the World Series and things like that. But other than that, last week we looked at our playoff predictions as well. And Yancey, you weren't here for our baseball preview, so you didn't have any to look at either. So let's see. Anything else you guys want to talk about college football?
What was your guys' early season pick, like preseason pick to go to the national championship? Obviously, we're not scratching it down to hold you to it or anything like that. But who do you guys see as the front runners? I would take Oregon as a sneaky pick, and Texas.
I mean, I don't even think it's gonna be sneaky. I think it's gonna be Oregon. I think Oregon is dangerous, and it's probably gonna be Oregon and Georgia. That's my thought. That's what I would think.
Georgia, nice.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a Big Ten against an SEC, and so whether that's Oregon or Ohio State or Michigan, out of the Big Ten, and whether it's Georgia or Georgia out of the SEC. I'm not sure who's beating Georgia in the SEC at this point, but Alabama with a new head coach, I'm not sure they're quite going to be there yet. But Washington could be a dangerous team too. They're changing coaches too. But so, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Just to look at Utah for one more time, I want to point out that with these two teams back in the Big 12, the Holy War is back on schedule. They'll be playing every year, Utah and BYU now. After I think was it 8 or 9 straight wins by Utah, BYU won the last one, and then it's been 2 years break between, and so I'm sure Utah's chomping at the bit to get back to on the winning side of that, which I assume they will be this year.
But obviously I get a lot of Utah material went out because I'm following them everywhere. And I saw an interview. I think it was at Big 12 Media Day, an interview with Cam Rising. Because if you think about it, last time they played BYU was actually Charlie Brewer playing, who was really, really sucking. And Cam Rising was his backup, just having to watch it, And so, and then didn't play for the 2 years and whatnot. So they're asking Cam Rising, what are you looking forward to? And he said, and I'll quote, "I just want to get down there and whoop their ass." that's what he said, and apparently he doesn't realize it's gonna be at home because he said, "I want to go down there." And whoop their ass.
Yeah, it's at home, man.
So people had to notify him that this is at home, but he was just like, "That's all I want to do. I just want to do that." And I thought that's funny.
Well, I'm going there anyway.
Yeah.
You're wearing a blue shirt. You're in trouble in Utah.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Utah's schedule too, it's pretty favorable. Looking at their schedule, I mean, this one is tough at Oklahoma State. That one is a very tough one, and the very following week at home against Arizona. So 2 back-to-back tough games. Everything else is very winnable.
Yeah, that's the thought. Is that's the teller. Is whatever happens on the 21st and 28th is going to be a good indication of what's going to happen to Utah. If they win both of those games, it's probably a good indication they're going to be in the conference championship, possibly winning it. If they lose both of those games, they're not going to be. So it's interesting. So it's kind of it's interesting to know that early. But the Oklahoma State game, as a Utah fan, it already has me biting at my nails.
Yeah, I mean, just as a guess, I bet they split those games. And if I were to guess, I'd pick the easy way, that they win the one at home against Arizona and they lose in Stillwater. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very possible.
Let's look at some other teams real quick in the last few minutes we have left. A little deeper dive. I'm a BYU alum. I graduated from there, so I had my eyes. Obviously, last year was rough, but again, like you said, Cody, first year in the Big 12, a little bit of an adjustment. They have the same two teams, but they get them both at home. Both Arizona and Oklahoma State both at home, but they have a tougher schedule. They also have Kansas State at home. So three of those top teams, but all of them at home, and Kansas. So four really tough teams, but they get them all at home, and then at Utah. So one tough road game, four tough home games. If they win one of those, I'll be happy. So as a BYU fan. So
and just a thought, while you have that Utah game highlighted, I think it's interesting that it being the Holy War, one of the more, I'm not going to say prominent, but I guess famous maybe rivalries. It's interesting that it's not on rivalry weekend, and that kind of made me a little upset and mad. But as I thought about it more, I don't want to hear your thought on this, both of you. I wonder if it's because the Big 12 is saying, well, while everyone else is probably doing, dead games, we're going to have a slot where everyone's going to want to watch Utah BYU. Is that kind of what they're doing, or what's the idea here? Why would they not do a rivalry weekend?
It deals with scheduling. I mean, a lot of teams are playing their rivals, but if you look at the other teams in the Big 12, you had Baylor and TCU. Well, I guess that's not the ninth though. So let's look what because I don't think there's much of a rivalry weekend in the Big 12. Baylor and Kansas, not exactly a big one. Iowa State, Arizona is that final game. So there's not much except for this last one, Arizona State. That's the rivalry of the last game. Let's see what else we got over here. That's not one. That's not one. Houston and BYU. Nothing.
So what do you think that is? What do you think Commissioner your Mark is thinking?
I'm thinking that if I was his PR guy, and I deal with PR all the time, it would be saying that we want every week to have big games. We're not saving our stuff for the last game of the season. We don't work that way. We work every game as a rivalry game because we're in the Big 12, and every game against our Big 12 opponents should be a rivalry game. So that's what I would say. I could see it going both ways, but let's not do the rivalry game stuff. Let's just slot these in when it makes the most sense for these teams to do it in, and make sure that every game is treated the big game as it should be. Kind of a thing.
So you spun that quick. If I ever run for office or start a cult, I'm calling you to explain stuff to
people. Going back up to the ACC real quick. Let's see here. I didn't see a whole lot that I wanted to point out on any of the teams. I was just wanting to revisit and see what's going on over here. I mean, we'll talk about Notre Dame when we get to independent too, but that's a big one because Notre Dame might be one of those last 7 teams, even out of an independent. Because Notre Dame is like Oregon State and Washington State now. They're essentially independent, big Power 5 teams where they don't get a conference championship game to get an automatic bid. They have to fight their way there every week. So
I do agree with that, but at the same time, I don't just because it's Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, if they have 9 wins, or even 10 or 9, they're probably getting in just because of Notre Dame.
It depends how everyone else does. I mean, if you have six or seven 13-1 teams at the end of the season, then Notre Dame isn't getting in with 9 wins. But it depends how the whole season shakes out. But, yeah. All right. Well, that covered the first part of our college football preview. It's going to feel weird because we're not doing our next college football preview for about a month. So we're not doing it next week. We're doing the NFL preview for 4 straight weeks, starting next week. We're covering 2 divisions at a time in the NFL. Next week, we're starting with the NFC North and AFC South, and we'll work our way from there. So NFL preview is going to be a much more in-depth look, because there's only 32 teams rather than 134, and so we can spend a little bit more time on every team and some of the off-season moves and predictions and things like that for every team, rather than looking at the conference as a whole. We're looking at each team individually, and so excited for that. In my mind, previews, especially the NFL preview, is kind of my Super Bowl week as a podcaster, as a preparer, as a sports enthusiast. I love covering previews. I love everything before a season starts and all the excitement that every team is Super Bowl contender in their own minds. So excited for that. Any last thoughts from either of you about college football or heading into next week?
I'm just amazed that you find the time to do all this, Scott. I don't like being having my full-time job, having my kids, doing all that. I have no idea how you can get all of this set up. I mean, what, you staying up until 1 a.m. doing this? When are you sleep? I don't know, but it is amazing and it's impressive. And thank you as well for doing that.
He got Neuralink whenever he met Elon and Wilt Chamberlain at the last press conference dinner.
So I'll say this, and I don't know if this should be on record or not, but so yes, I have a full-time job, and I probably work 45 to 50 hours a week on it, and I'm a full-time dad. This as a podcaster is a part-time job. I'm probably spending 20 hours a week on this, but I love it, and so I do it in the mornings. It's my passion, and so I get mornings before Ivy wakes up, so 2 hours before I wake up at usually 5:30 in the morning, and I'm doing this until Ivy gets up around 7 or 7:30, and then I sometimes, if I can't sleep, I'm coming out here and doing it at night too. So it's not a need. I know it's not. I don't get paid for this. I'd love to get paid for it if anyone's listening, but I don't get paid for it. But it is a passion. I love doing this. This is if I could choose to get paid for any job, this would be it. This is what I want to do. So, yeah.
Well, I understand that passions, drive us to do whatever it is. So, but anyway, it's amazing, but also, thank you. I recognize the hard work. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but it's awesome. So I do appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk to you next week with Dustin intact, and remember to get your NFL preview document done by a week from tomorrow, because we're meeting on Thursday next week, not Wednesday, because Cody's on the road on Wednesday. And so we're meeting Thursday. So you have 8 days to get all of that done, because we're going to be using it extensively starting next week. So.
Sweet.
Okay.
Later.